It's doing the things that you know you're supposed to do. That's what it is. You know what you're supposed to do, and you know what you're not supposed to do. You know what's going to make your life better, and you know what's going to make your life worse. You know what's going to improve your station and what's going to make your station worse. You know what's going to improve your health and what's going to make your health worse. You know these things. And so the path is doing the things that you're supposed to do that you know are going to improve you as a person. They're going to help your family. They're going to help your health. They're going to help your community, and they're going to help the world. Do those things. That's the path. And if you only do things that are hard when you're motivated to do them, you're only going to do them 50% of the time, 70% of the time, 30% of the time. So I don't count on motivation. Motivation actually means nothing to me. It doesn't matter if I want to do something or not, if I'm motivated to do something or not. If it's what I'm supposed to do, I'm just going to have the discipline and the willpower to do what I'm supposed to do. That's it.
Welcome to another episode of the Breaking Muscle Podcast, where each week we bring you practical insights from some of the biggest names and strongest minds in all of fitness. I am Pete Hitzeman, the managing editor at BreakingMuscle.com, and your host for today's show. What would your life look like if you had the freedom to do whatever you want? Would it be all relaxation and goofing off, spontaneity and fun? Probably not. In fact, it would probably involve a greater degree of discipline and structure than you have previously imagined. If that seems counterintuitive, you're going to want to keep listening. Former Navy SEAL Jocko Willink's third book, The Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual, is a tactical guide to the practices and philosophies he has employed in his own life. Through them, he has thrived in his combat career, excelled in civilian business, run a successful gym for a decade, and rocketed to the top of the New York Times bestsellers list. Jocko sat down with me to talk about how his experiences in Iraq as a SEAL task unit commander allowed him to distill the fundamental tenets of leadership that are applicable to all organizations. We also explore how some of the messages and products the fitness industry pushes aren't helping people get to their goals, and how his acceptance of the inherent nature of struggle in life has allowed him to never cease striving. We touch on the practical benefits of constant discipline as well. Since time and money are finite, you have to spend what you have wisely if you want to have more. Finally, Jocko gives his take on what's behind the paradigm shift in fitness from Jazzercise and Richard Simmons to Spartan races and CrossFit. Although it does contain a comprehensive workout guide, Discipline Equals Freedom is more than a workout book. It is a manifesto against personal weakness and excuse-making, a step-by-step guide to reshaping the person you are into the person you wish to be. Jocko even used the book himself after the recent passing of his best friend in a tragic accident. We're working hard here at Breaking Muscle to bring you the guests and topics you want to hear each week. If you like what you hear, be sure to help us spread the good word by heading over to iTunes or Stitcher to leave us a rating and a review. And if there's anything else you'd like us to do better, drop us a line at editorial@breakingmuscle.com. Joining us today on the Breaking Muscle podcast is a very special guest. He's a former Navy SEAL task unit commander turned business leadership coach turned author and podcast host. And judging by his Instagram, he's also the unofficial brand ambassador for Timex watches. Jocko Willink, thanks for making the time to sit down with us this morning.
Thanks for having me on.
So you have just released a couple of weeks ago your third book that has gone sort of straight to the top of the Amazon charts. Your first book was Extreme Ownership, which spent quite a lot of time on the New York Times bestseller list. I believe your new book, which is The Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual, will also be there for some time. And in between, you wrote Way of the Warrior Kid. So you've got three very different books, and I'm expecting your next book to be like a collection of dad jokes or something, just to keep us on our toes. Where did you come up with the idea for the Field Manual?
Well, the Field Manual really is a result of the podcast that I have called Jocko Podcast. And on the podcast, obviously I talk a lot about leadership on the podcast, and I talk a lot about war on the podcast, but I do talk about physical training and diet and sleep modes and those kind of things. And as I was with that podcast, people were asking me all the time, well, what are your workouts, and what do you actually eat, and how many hours do you actually sleep, and what do you do when you feel tired, and what do you do when you get injured? And as people ask me these questions, I decided, okay, well, I'm just going to put all this stuff in one simple place where people can find it and see it. And what I originally was going to do was just do an ebook, and just write an ebook and say, okay, everyone, here you go. Here's 25 pages. It's got a bunch of my workouts in there. Well, then I eventually decided that I would turn it into an actual book and put kind of the excerpts from the podcast that are more about the way that I think, and then the actions that I take to reinforce and follow the thoughts that I have. So the book is broken into two parts: thoughts and actions. And thoughts, like I said, are what I think, and actions are what I actually do. And that includes what I eat, how I sleep, how I work out, what I do when I'm injured, what different training I like to do, and what my life is like sort of from a physical and mental health perspective.
Where did the title itself come from?
Well, the title itself comes from a phrase that I use as kind of my mantra: discipline equals freedom. And I was actually talking the other day about where that came from. And where it came from, I was teaching a class to some junior SEAL officers, guys that had just graduated from SEAL training, and they were moving into leadership positions and in the SEAL teams for the first time. And I was trying to kind of describe to them what I did that made me do okay in the SEAL teams, and the philosophy that I used. And the philosophy was discipline equals freedom. And that is, the more disciplined you are, the more freedom you're going to have. And it falls into every different part of your life, no matter what it is that you're trying to do. I mean, we all want to have freedom in every different way that we possibly can. But what people don't realize oftentimes is that the way to get freedom is not by doing whatever you want and acting as free as you can. The way you get freedom is by actually having discipline and having structure and doing things that you're supposed to do, that you know you're supposed to do, that will give you freedom. But people that run around just doing whatever they want, acting as free as they can, well, they end up drug addicts and bums living in the streets because they don't have any money, and they're broke, and they're addicted to drugs, and they're eating horrible foods, and they're unhealthy and everything else. So that's the path. That's the pathway of complete freedom and doing whatever you want.
Yeah, and there is a logistical reality to this too, right? If your life lacks discipline, you limit your possibilities. You end up costing yourself the opportunity to say yes to other things later on. In practical terms, you stay out until 3 a.m. partying, getting drunk. You are not going to be productive the next day. So you just limited your freedom the next day by not having any discipline the night before. This is not just a mantra. This is something that has practical application, and you get into a lot of that in the book. Which, by the way, I like that you call it a field manual, because it caused me to think about all the field manuals I had to read when I was in the Air Force, and I wish someone would have written them with a little more flair, as you did. It's not dry as most field manuals tend to be. You mentioned for a moment the philosophy behind this, and there are some deep philosophical underpinnings. It reads a lot like Stoic philosophy. Is that something that you studied?
Nope. And people have asked me many times if I read the ancients and if I studied Buddha and if I studied the Stoics. And the fact of the matter is, I joined the military right out of high school. And I think it boils down to the fact that if you put human beings into certain situations, they're going to come to very similar conclusions. And if you look at guys that were warriors and leaders like Marcus Aurelius, yeah, he's going to come to the same conclusions as I came to, just on a different path and a different time. And actually, the paths are pretty similar. I mean, I'm not comparing myself to Marcus Aurelius, but I'm just saying, I was a guy that did war for a living, and he was too. And so when you put people in those situations, they're going to come to very similar conclusions over time, even if it's thousands of years apart.
And that points to fundamental truths, right? If many people across broad spans of time are coming to the same conclusions, probably means there's something pretty powerful there to latch onto. Let's go into your background a little bit. You joined the SEALs very early, enlisted very early. And what was your athletic background before you enlisted?
I was like a marginal athlete. I played soccer and basketball, wasn't really great at either one of them, and that was it. Joined the military. The people are always think that everybody that's in the SEAL teams were these incredible athletes, and the fact of the matter is they're not. And plenty of them, I mean, I was about middle of the road going through SEAL training. As far as my run times and my swim times and my obstacle course times, there were guys that were way better athletes than me for sure. And that doesn't actually mean anything. Unfortunately, you can be a great athlete and you can still have a real hard time with training. The two examples that I bring up all the time are one guy that was in my BUDS, my SEAL training class, which is called BUDS. He was, one guy was a NCAA water polo team captain and NCAA champion.
Wow.
And just a beast of a guy, and he quit. And then I had another guy that was a gymnastics U.S. Olympic team alternate, and he also quit. So there's two guys that were absolutely way beyond any level of athletic capability that I had, and they both quit. So the athletic ability is kind of important, but it's also not the only thing. And people always ask if it's mental or physical, and it is definitely both. I mean, I don't care how bad you want to do a rope climb. If you haven't trained to do a rope climb, all that want and all that desire doesn't get you up a rope. Your forearm muscles are going to fail, and you're going to fall down. And we saw that, quite often. Doesn't matter how bad somebody wants it mentally if they're physically weak. At the same token, like the guys I just talked about, guys that are physically strong but they're mentally weak, they're not going to make it. And then you have some people that are kind of in the middle on both sides, and they can still make it through. And some people are just studs on both sides, and they're physically mutants, just unbelievable athletes, and they're mentally really strong guys, and they make it through, relatively easily. So it can take a variety of characteristics and strengths to get you through, but there's no guarantee that you're going to make it.
Was the plan always for you to join the military, like from an early age?
Yeah, that's pretty much the only thing I remember actually wanting to do with my life was be some kind of commando.
Nice. That sort of singularity of purpose yields some very strong results just from the focus of it. So you went through a very difficult time to be a SEAL, to be in the military in general. The post 9/11 military world is not for the faint of heart. It's a unique challenge that we hadn't faced in a very long time, and we'd forgotten a lot of the lessons that we had learned from previous engagements. So everything kind of came to a head in 2006 in Ramadi, which is a battle that's been written about from every angle and from many perspectives, and it was a chaotic, savage, crazy engagement. So you were not just involved, but a leader in one of the most complicated, grueling, house-to-house nasty fights that we've been in a very, very long time. And from that, you took a whole bunch of lessons that have become sort of the pillars of your business model as a civilian going forward. Can you kind of talk about how did you extract those objective, broadly applicable lessons from that crucible?
Well, in the Battle of Ramadi, like you said, it was sustained urban combat over, for us, it was a 6-month period. For the Army, they had been there for 14 months. When we got there, the brigade that showed up, and then the brigade that took over for them was there for a year. So we were there for about 6 months. My SEAL task unit was there for about 6 months. And yes, the fighting was hard, and we took a lot of lessons that I had learned from the old Vietnam SEALs, and we applied them. And they worked. And so when I got back from that deployment, I took over the training for the West Coast SEAL teams. And what that means is it's not the training where you see people carrying logs around and carrying boats on their head. It's the actual tactical training where people learn to shoot, move, and communicate, and they learn to fire and maneuver, and they learn to close with and destroy the enemy, and they learn combat leadership. And when I was a task unit commander or a platoon commander, I had basically a year to work with my guys and get them up to speed and teach them what I had learned over the years. And when I took over that training, I only had about 2 weeks with each SEAL platoon to teach the leadership what they were going to face on the battlefield and how to deal with it. So I really quickly realized I needed to distill down what I had learned into some very straightforward and understandable and implementable laws that they could use. And that's what I did. And I wrote down the basic 4 laws of combat. And when I wrote those down, I started teaching them. And those are the basis of exactly what I still teach to business leaders today.
How is that transition going from teaching people who have a common ethos and who speak a common language with you in the military to teaching those same fundamental principles, those philosophical truths that we mentioned earlier, to business professionals and civilians and people who don't necessarily use all the same words that we use?
Well, all you have to do is give them the vocabulary, and they understand it when, as soon as they hear it, you give them one explanation, they understand how it fits into their world. I mean, it's leadership, and leadership is leadership. I don't care if you're taking people out to capture, kill insurgents on the battlefield, or you're taking people out to make a widget or sell something or create new intellectual property. If you have a team and you're trying to get them to execute a mission, you need to use fundamental leadership principles that have been around for a long time, that have been tested in the harshest of conditions, and that's what we teach.
Let's get into the book itself. The Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual, for people who have already read Extreme Ownership and listened to your podcast, is not going to break a lot of new ground because they already understand sort of your philosophy. But for people who are looking for a direction and trying to make a change, this could be extremely valuable. So let's come from the outside and work in. Why should anybody work so hard as you talk about? You spent a couple hundred pages laying out this very regimented, disciplined, hardworking lifestyle. But isn't modernity about comfort? Shouldn't we all be just, relaxing? We've made it.
Yes, and if you want to relax and you want to enjoy your life, then you have to get to a point where you can relax and enjoy it. And you're not going to be there if you're unhealthy, if you're weak, if you're sick, if you're broke, if you are in the gutter. You're not going to be able to do those things you just talked about. So, I was actually, as you mentioned, my social media a little earlier. One morning I woke up early in the morning and I worked out, and then I went for a run, and then I went surfing, and then I went and trained jiu-jitsu, and then by, I think it was around lunchtime, I posted on Instagram 4 pictures, one of me working out, one of me going for a run, one of me going surfing. And when I say me, it's not really pictures of me, but it's just pictures of the gym, pictures of the road, pictures of the waves, and pictures of the jiu-jitsu mat. And after a while, people were putting their comments on it, and one of the guys wrote, "Must be nice."
Well, yeah.
and I at first I kind of felt bad, because I thought to myself, that's kind of messed up. Who knows where this guy is in his life, and maybe he's working 2 jobs, and maybe doesn't have time to go surfing or work out, and he's got to take care of his kids, and he's got whatever he's got going on in his life. I mean, I don't know, and I feel bad that here I am just cruising all morning and surfing, and it was a weekday. It was like a Tuesday. And there I was surfing and doing jiu-jitsu and working out and going for a run on a beautiful Southern California day. And I kind of felt bad, and I thought to myself, that's kind of messed up. I mean, maybe I shouldn't post pictures of how good I have it, because it's not cool to do that to other people. And as I'm sitting there thinking about that for a little while, and then a little while later, somebody else posted a response to him. And his response was, "Discipline equals freedom." And of course, obviously, that's my mantra. And the guy's point was, yeah, it is nice. And guess how this guy ended up in a situation in his life where he can do this fun stuff all day long. I didn't take pictures and post the 27 years that I've been doing work all day long, every day, traveling, fighting, and getting after it to get to a point where, yeah, you know what, if it's 10 o'clock and the tide is right and the waves are good, I'm going surfing. Mm-hmm. So that's why discipline equals freedom. If you want to have freedom in your life, and it applies to every different type of freedom you can imagine. And two that I talk about all the time, and I'll talk about them one more time, is, everyone wants to have financial freedom. Well, how do you get financial freedom? You have to have financial discipline. That's how you get financial freedom. You have to save your money. You have to work hard. You have to not spend your money. You have to make good investments. You have to not buy things that you don't actually need. The flashy car that you think is going to look cool, that goes down in value the minute you drive it off the market. I mean, off the lot. Those are the kind of things that people do because they lack the discipline. And so if you want to have financial freedom, you've got to have financial discipline. The other thing is free time. If you want to have free time, everyone wants more free time, of course. But if you want to have more free time, the only way to get more free time is to have a more disciplined time management and to wake up, have the discipline to wake up earlier, have the discipline to have a schedule to know what you're actually going to do, have the discipline to say no to things that are wasting your time and not being beneficial to you in any way, like watching stupid YouTube videos, which, many people end up doing. And YouTube actually has it down to a science. They're in your head. They know your psychology. They know what you want to watch. And when you finish watching one video, they put up 8 more videos on that next rack of all these amazing things that you can't live without seeing. And so you click on the next one, and that cycle continues until it's been 48 minutes and you haven't done what you're supposed to do. So that's why discipline equals freedom, and that's why you should stay on a disciplined path.
And stay on it all the time. One of the things you get to late in the book is you don't sleep in on weekends. You don't have cheat days. You don't have, you're a human being, so you're going to have a treat now and again, but you don't plan that and just, knock off 20% right off the top.
Yeah, the 80-20 rule. That usually doesn't work out too good. That slides real quick into the 70-30 and then the 60-40 and 50-50, and then the next thing you know, you're sitting there with a sleeve of Oreo cookies watching, another episode of The Office on Netflix. Right. So you need to watch out for that for sure. And of course, discipline equals freedom. And that means I do have freedom. And if I want to get after a mint chocolate chip milkshake, I will absolutely do that. The sleep thing is a little bit different. Here's the problem with the sleep thing is it's when you let yourself sleep in until 5:30 or 6 o'clock on Saturday, well then that night you have a little extra energy. And it's Saturday night, so you stay up a little later. And now next thing you know, it's 11, or now it's midnight, or now it's 12:30. And you had a little extra energy, you felt good, but now the alarm clock, now you sleep in the next day because it's a weekend. Well, now you got up at 6:30 or 7. And now you have even more extra energy the next, that following night, Sunday night. So now you stay up a little later Sunday night. So now when the alarm clock goes off on Monday morning, you don't want to get up and get out of bed because you broke the cycle. You only got 4 hours of sleep. So, but if you just stay consistently getting up at the same time every day, Saturday, Sunday, it's going to be beneficial for you. You'll get on a good sleep cycle and you'll stay there. And you'll have longer weekends. Your weekends will be better because you'll have more time in them because you didn't waste it sleeping.
I like that you say 5:30 or 6 a.m. is sleeping in. I think that is a perfect illustration of the difference in culture between, the kind of lifestyle that you are exemplifying and what most people consider sleeping in. Like most people would be like, 11 o'clock in the morning, that's sleeping in.
Sleeping until 11 o'clock in the morning is actually called death. If you're sleeping that late, you are dead, and you need to get yourself resuscitated.
Right. So the other thing that you touched on in that section was that addicts don't get 20% of their drug if they're trying to recover.
Yeah,
and I think that applies. You're using it to talk about sugar and nutrition, but that applies to just about everything. If you're addicted to any kind of thing that is not beneficial to you, which addiction by definition is not beneficial, you can't just be like, well, I'm going to moderate that input, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, I haven't run into any moderate addicts out there in the world.
No, that's not generally how that works. So is there a danger with this philosophy of setting the bar too high, right? This is such a sharp contrast between what most people are doing now, which is basically dying, and what you are advocating, which is basically living. But there is such a contrast. Is it a bridge too far, or are we asking people to do too much to get to where you're talking about?
I don't think so. This is the thing. Here's how I'll answer your question. If people actually wrote down what it is they wanted to do with their life, they wouldn't write down, number 1, eat a lot of Doritos. Number 2, watch a bunch of Netflix. Number 3, get fat and out of shape. Number 4, be financially lost. Number 5, have poor overall health. That's not what they would write down. No one that I know would actually write that down. Do you know anyone that would write that down?
Nope.
No. So what would people actually write down if they were to write down what they wanted their life to be like? Well, what they would write down is they would say, I want to be strong, I want to be healthy, I want to have comfortable amount of money, I want to live in a cool place that I enjoy, and I want to be productive and create things in the world. That's what they would say. And so what I'm saying is if you want to do those things, there's only one way you're going to get there, and that's with discipline. If you don't have discipline, you won't be able to do those things. That's all there is to it.
And you have to accept from the get-go that there is going to be discomfort and hardship, and your body's going to scream at you to stop and go back to bed, and scream at you to eat the bag of Doritos and all of the other things you're accustomed to because you're accustomed to them, and because there are neurochemical reactions to the things that you're used to doing. One of the things you've talked about is being okay being hungry, and it won't kill you. What is your relationship with food like in that respect?
Well, that's just your classic example of being American for the most part, which is if you have somebody that missed breakfast for whatever reason by 10 o'clock, they're saying, oh God, I'm starving, I gotta go get something, I gotta run down to Starbucks and get a bagel or whatever they sell at Starbucks. And they think that they're gonna die if they don't eat a bagel by 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And the fact of the matter is that's just not true. And human beings, you can actually go 30 days without food at all. So you can make it the next 4 hours. The big one for me is the airport. You go through the airport, and if you haven't planned properly, then you have to buy airport food, and airport food generally isn't that great. And so people say, well, I've got this layover in between wherever I'm flying, and if I don't eat right now, I won't be able to eat until I land in 2 hours. You're not going to die. You're going to live. You can live 2 more hours without eating the pretzel-wrapped hot dogs, which I admit are tasty, but they're not good for you. So just wait and don't eat, and wait until you get some good food.
I spend a lot of time in airports too with my IT job, and one of the things that is striking to me now that I never would have realized years ago is that sort of panicky feeling. I used to be a smoker, right? I'd smoke a pack a day, and when you're a smoker, being in an airport is like the worst thing ever, because most of them don't even have like areas to go. Like once you're through security, you're in. And so that panicky feeling when you're finally getting off the airplane and you have this voice in the back of your head that's telling you to just run to the nearest exit and find the nearest ashtray. But it's the same thing with food now, right? So if we as Americans, because food is all around us all the time, we panic if it's not there. We panic if we don't have easy access to it or we haven't had it in 2 or 3 hours. That is an addiction. Like you are a slave to your biology at that point. Discipline equals freedom, right? If you have the discipline to not eat, to look at the food and go, I'm going to be fine. I'm not going to die if I don't eat right now. That is freedom, because then you're not driven by your biology to go chase down a Cinnabon, which are the worst things on the planet, or chase down your...
I've never had a Cinnabon, but I've seen them.
They're highly overrated.
They look evil.
They really are. So one day even not eating, and you mentioned you fast for 72 hours regularly, like several times through the year.
Yeah, regularly is probably once a quarter. And then I do a 24-hour fast, probably more often than that. And I actually fast. I mean, some days, it's pretty normal for me just to get up and start. Like yesterday, I had to record a podcast. I woke up, worked out, I did a little bit more preparation, went in, recorded the podcast. It was a 4-hour podcast, got done with that, and it was now 2 o'clock in the afternoon, was up in LA, and drove home. And didn't eat until I got home. So that's kind of a normal, that all of a sudden, that was a 24-hour fast, or actually it was probably a 20-hour fast. Didn't think of it. Didn't think anything about it. Just, I didn't die. I'm living proof that you don't need to eat every 4 hours. And what you talked about, as you were describing being a smoker, which I never smoked, but as you were describing what that feels like, you nailed it, and I'm glad you said you were a slave to these little sticks filled with this weird weed that you suck into your lungs. You are actually a slave to that thing. And it can be the same with food, and that's one of the cool things about fasting. And one of the best things about fasting is it really recalibrates what hunger is. Because we think we're, like I said, we think we're hungry if we hadn't had a bagel in 3 hours. And that's just not true. And when you go 72 hours without eating, you realize after the first 24 hours, you don't feel hungry anymore. And in 48 hours, you're good to go. And 72 hours, you say, oh, okay, I could actually go a while like this. And so that idea that you recalibrate what hunger actually is, I think is very helpful for your regular days where you are going to eat, because you realize, oh, I'm not that hungry. I don't need to eat right now. I just had my buddy, we went out for lunch, and he ordered his food, and I didn't order anything. And he's like, you're not going to eat? And I said, well, I'm not hungry. I'm not hungry right now. I'm not just going to eat just because I'm sitting at a table with food on it. If I'm not hungry, don't eat.
And that's some next level stuff, right? I mean, it's one thing when things are going right and you have your plan and you have your Tupperware and whatever the structure is you created around your life to enable you to have that healthy relationship with food is one thing. But when you're in an all-day conference room meeting, just staring at engineers talking all day, there's trays full of food outside, and everyone's just sort of plowing, and to sit there and watch that happen and not, that is a triumph over your biology there, because every signal in your body is saying you should do that thing or you're going to die. But
we're programmed. We are programmed that might be the last food that you ever see, so you better eat as much of it as you can right now.
Yeah,
that is part of your programming. So it should feel good to overcome your own personal programming, and you should be able to sit there and look at people as they're stuffing their face with poison and think to yourself, I got you.
Right, and that's the edge, right? That's the edge where you can kind of latch on to your own psychological strength and say, I can do this because I'm better. My own relationship with fasting kind of happened by accident. So my wife had a medical procedure and she had to fast for that, and so as a show of solidarity, I decided I was going to fast with her. And so we both fasted for about 24 hours prior to the procedure, and then through the procedure, and then after we went out to lunch, and we sat down because we're like, oh, we're going to be so hungry. We're going to sit down, we're just going to plow this food. And it was weird because we sat down and she got like a stack of pancakes. I don't remember what I got, like an omelet or something. And I just looked at it and went, I don't want this as much as I thought I would want this. And I ate it, and it was fine, but I didn't have any burning desire to like get 3 or 4 more plates full of food in me like I thought I would. It was a very eye-opening experience to say, actually being hungry doesn't make you more hungry. It's kind of a weird thing that happens after that. I think like after that 16 or 18 hour mark, something switches over.
It's something like that. I'll have to pay more attention to it and see when it hits me that I don't actually feel hungry. And the other thing is, I do totally normal things. Even when I fast for 72 hours, I still do workouts. I still go to I literally do the exact same thing that I do anyways. And I feel the same. I feel the same. I mean, I don't even know. I'd have to measure my actual performance, but I feel the same. I still roll jiu-jitsu. I still work out. I've done heavy squat days and sprints when I'm fasted for 65 hours or whatever. It's fine. Your body's just takes care of it.
And you adapt to it over time. I mean, you're not going to rush right into this the first time you ever try it. You go from eating, 6 times a day or something, spread over 18 hours, your jaw is just constantly moving on food. You're not going to jump straight into a 72-hour fast and feel awesome. But work at it. You'll adapt. You'll get better at it. The working out fasted thing was another sort of revelation for me. There was a coach at a local CrossFit gym that came down and gave a talk about some diet practices, and one of the things he encouraged people to try was intermittent fasting. And he pitched it as something very basic, just skip breakfast, right? If you eat dinner at your normal time, you skip breakfast, by the time you get to lunch, you have fasted for 12, 14 hours, depending on what your time is. So I was like, but what about my workouts? Because you're supposed to have your pre-workout, and then you're going to have your intro workout, and then you're going to have your protein shake after your workout. You have to have all the food, or else you're going to lose all your gains, right? You can't perform if you don't have food. And then I found out that's completely untrue. And the more I went toward the practice that he was describing, I started doing my races fasted. I do almost all of my training, my endurance training fasted, and I perform so much better. I'm clear in my mind. I don't bonk as much as I used to, and the deeper I go down that path, the more useful it's been. It's really illustrative about the consumerist culture we have in fitness, in the fitness industry, telling you you need all these things and all these products and all these nutritional supplements and everything else, and then you don't take any of them, and oh, I forgot my lifters and I forgot my knee sleeves and I forgot my wrist wraps, but today is a clean and jerk day. Well, lift anyway and see how you do, and oh, you were fine. Everything is okay, even though you didn't have all those things you told yourself you had to have.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think that is a classic case of the way people want to sell things and the way things really are, and also just the adaptability of the human body. And I used to enjoy, I never liked working out with anything in my stomach. I never liked that feeling. And so I never really ate anything. If I knew I had to do something, I never really ate anything for 4 or 5 hours prior to. And the less I eat before, the better I feel. Now, again, I'd have to get hooked up to some kind of scientific test to see what my performance level and see if I needed more glucose in my whatever. But I'll tell you how I feel on a day-to-day basis. If I eat less, I feel better.
Yep. Well, and it's Andy Galpin talks a lot about if you're always optimizing, you're never adapting. And so doing all of my training fasted means that when I optimize on race morning and I have a banana before I go race, I feel like I'm on jet fuel. Like I feel so amazing because I'm used to being in this less than optimal state all the time that, but you can't use that if you do it every day. It's no longer an advantage. What's the difference for you between discipline and willpower and motivation? Those are all three concepts sort of centered around the same thing, but how do they change for you?
To me, discipline and willpower are pretty similar.
Okay.
I think those are pretty similar things. If you have the will to make things happen, then that's the same to me as having discipline. And motivation is the one that I don't really take much stock in. Motivation is, hey, I'm really motivated to do this today. Well, actually, that may be fine for today, but tomorrow you might not have that motivation and you might not have it the next day. And if you only do things that are hard when you're motivated to do them, you're only going to do them 50% of the time, 70% of the time, 30% of the time. So I don't count on motivation. Motivation actually means nothing to me. It doesn't matter if I want to do something or not, if I'm motivated to do something or not. If it's what I'm supposed to do, I'm just going to have the discipline and the willpower to do what I'm supposed to do. That's it.
What about balance in life? You talk a lot about your hard work and your discipline and getting up early and getting after it and getting the minimum amount of sleep, I guess, that you require to excel every day. Is there relaxation? Is there times where you just knock it off?
Well, I do jiu-jitsu and I go surfing, and those are pretty relaxing for me. And even working out is pretty relaxing for me. So yeah, I relax a lot when I'm surfing and doing jiu-jitsu and working out. And I play guitar, so I'll play guitar, watch the sunset. It's all good. Hang out. I got 4 kids. I got a wife and 4 kids. Do something with them. But
it doesn't mean laying on the couch.
That doesn't even, laying on the couch really is annoying, actually. Now, I do like ice cream. As I said, I like mint chocolate chip milkshakes, and I like them a lot. And I have no problem with, saying, hey, it's been, I worked out super hard the last 2 days, and I'm going to get my mint chocolate chip milkshake on. I got no issue with that.
What is your home gym setup like?
I've got, a squat rack, dip bars, multiple sets of rings. I got a GHD. I got bumper plates, obviously. I got kettlebells. I got a rower. I've got an air assault bike. Yeah, I guess that's it.
That's a heck of a setup, man.
Yeah, it's cool.
What can't you do there? So I brought that up because one of the things you talk about is how crucial a home gym can be in keeping you on track, right? Sometimes the weather's bad. Sometimes, whatever. Sometimes you can't make it to the gym. Life gets in the way. So having that opportunity to go train at home with a bare minimum of equipment, what would you consider like the essentials of a home gym?
Okay, well, and I actually wrote about this in Discipline Equals Freedom in the field manual because a lot of people ask me this question. Really what you need to start with is a pull-up bar. You need to have a pull-up bar because if you just have a pull-up bar, you can do your entire body because you can do pull-ups, you can do squats, you can do push-ups, you can do sprints, you can do burpees. There's enough calisthenics you can do with just a pull-up bar that it actually is pretty good to go. Now, the other thing that you could replace that with is rings. If you get a set of rings and you can mount those, then you can do a lot more exercises because you can still do pull-ups, but you can do muscle-ups, you can do dips, you can do ring dips, you can do ring push-ups. So, I think you want to start with something that you either rings or a pull-up bar. And then for me, it's squat rack. You need a squat rack and you need bumper plates. And once you have a squat rack and bumper plates, you're good to go. Squat rack, bumper plates, pull-up bar, you're good to go. Because I have a rower, but I also just do sprints out in the alley, and that's just as good. It's a little bit different, but it's the same thing. It's fine. And same thing with an assault bike. I have those basically for boredom, to eliminate boredom. And just to mix it up, and they're fun to have. And you do a little 2 minutes of rowing or 2 minutes of air assault bike because you did burpees for the last 8 days in a row. And so you say, okay, I'm going to do something a little bit different. But those, I think, is where you start. And then kettlebells, you can, I think kettlebells are the next addition. GHD is definitely a nice to have. The main thing you need to save up for is a squat rack, because a squat rack usually comes with a pull-up bar. It usually comes with some kind of dip apparatus that you can hook onto it, and then you're really good to go.
You touched on something there that I think is maybe underemphasized in most people's programs, which is variety, keeping yourself interested. Because boredom is the enemy, right? Like if you get bored, you're going to disengage. It's the way human psychology sort of works. So you engage in a whole big wide variety of things, from calisthenics and bodyweight stuff to barbell work to martial arts to surfing. Is that intentional, or are you just like to chase different stuff?
Yeah, I just chase different stuff. And again, I talk about in the book, there'll be a time where I'm going to try and max out my deadlift. And then you get to a point where maybe I've achieved, I don't know, 80% or 90% of my actual human potential of deadlifting. And in order to get to my 100% maximum deadlift of my life that my human structure and muscle density is built for, I would then have to just change everything in my life and just become a person that only deadlifts. And I'm not going to do that. And so I don't do that. When I get to a good where it's starting to get really hard for me to gain anything else, and I'm really having to start to shift my workouts around, then it's time for me to move on to something else, because I don't want to be so big and strong that I can't do any muscle ups. I don't want to be so big and heavy that I can't do a good 4-mile run. So once I get to a point that I've gotten pretty close to what I think I'm capable of, and the gains start becoming very, very hard to make, and I'm having to make adjustments and take away from other aspects of my physical capabilities, then I'm going to move on to the next challenge. So that's what I do.
Yeah, there's always a cost to specialization, to reaching your maximum potential in any one endeavor. So if my thing is that the people that I coach, if you're not getting paid to do it, then don't specialize, because the costs are too high for the long term for your sustainable fitness. One of the other things you brought up in the book that I think could not be emphasized enough, and it's a glaring hole in my own game, so this is one of the things that really lit me up, was martial arts are part of general fitness. Nobody really talks about that. Everybody sort of looks at martial artists as this, fringe subset of humanity, but you make the argument that everybody should be doing it. How do you advocate people getting into martial arts?
Well, that's actually weird that you would say that martial arts are the fringe subset of humanity, because basically everyone I hang around with does jiu-jitsu, boxing, and Muay Thai. So for me, it's all people. My family, everyone does jiu-jitsu, and so that's funny that you should think it's this fringe thing, and it is growing. And I live in sort of the ground zero of jiu-jitsu in America, which is Southern California. Mm-hmm. So there's jiu-jitsu schools on every corner. It's pretty awesome out here. But how do you get into martial arts? Yeah, you go down and you go on Google, you find a good Brazilian jiu-jitsu school that's close to your home or close to your work, so it's easy for you to get to. And then you go down and check it out. You start trying it. It's fun. It's a fun thing to do, and it's a great capability to have. It gets you in shape. It improves your mental fitness as well, because as you train jiu-jitsu, you have to overcome a bunch of things. You have to overcome the grind of getting on the mat. You have to overcome being held down by another person in a situation that you don't want to be held down in. You have to overcome the frustration of getting beat by people that are smaller and weaker than you. And there's all these things that you have to overcome. You have to learn how to relax. You have to learn how to turn your mind off. You have to learn to put your ego in check. It's a very humiliating sport, very humbling. I shouldn't say humiliating, but it's very humbling when you're a big, tough guy and all of a sudden you're getting beat by somebody that weighs, almost half your body weight. It's crazy. So go down, Google jiu-jitsu school, Brazilian jiu-jitsu school, find one in your area and go start training. It's pretty simple.
Why jiu-jitsu rather than karate or taekwondo or any of the other sort of mainstream martial arts?
Because in those martial arts, they're a lot less about actually fighting, and they're more of a dance type. That's the basis of the training, and so there's a lot of flashy kicks. There's a lot of sparring with the air, and jiu-jitsu, you fight other people on a daily basis, and you go hard. It's very similar to wrestling, and so if you want to do a striking art, then you should do boxing or Muay Thai, because those are sports where you actually hit and punch and you spar with other human beings, and that makes it very realistic. And same thing with jiu-jitsu and wrestling. And there's other, judo is very similar as well. So there's other good martial arts, but jiu-jitsu is a really good base to have for self-defense. It's a really good sport to have because it's fun, and you can kind of mitigate some of the risks that even with judo is a great sport, and it's a great self-defense, but it's based on throwing your opponent. A lot of it is based on throwing your opponent. And so that means you're going to get thrown sometimes. And so if you're 46 years old, you don't want to be getting thrown around if you've never done a martial art before. If you're 58 years old, you don't want to get thrown. You want to do something that's a little bit easier on your body, which jiu-jitsu certainly is. And same with wrestling. Wrestling is an awesome sport. I mean, my kids wrestle, and it's one of the greatest sports there is. But if you're 58 years old and you're going to learn a martial art for the first time, wrestling is hardcore. And jiu-jitsu definitely has it's a little bit easier on your body if you want it to be. Now, it can also be level 29 murder when you're training for competition, you're training with really good guys. Yeah, it's brutal. It's a brutal sport. It's hard as hell. But you can also scale it down so that you're learning and you're still using it in an effective manner, but you're not getting injured.
It's a good balance, right? It checks a lot of boxes. You're on the ground. You're doing that important from a primal physiological perspective, that groundwork that helps you build balance from side to side and overcome, limb strength discrepancies and all those sorts of things, and proprioceptive awareness and all those nice, scientific in a lab things happen on a jiu-jitsu mat.
Yeah, I'm glad you're telling me because I don't know what any of those things were, but I guess if you're saying, we'll go with it. I know it feels good to train, and I know if you take little kids and you put them in a room, you take two little boys and put them in a room, at some point in the next half hour, they're going to be wrestling or grappling each other. That's the way it works. And so you take human beings, everyone likes to grapple and fight each other. It's fun. It's really, really fun. And that's why, I guess, all the scientific stuff that makes it cool too, hey, right on. That's a bonus.
Just different words to say the same thing is all it is, really. If you just read the book, it would seem like you've got this dialed. Well, and to a large extent, you probably do have this dialed. You can't produce at the level you do unless you've got it pretty well locked down. But are there things that you still struggle with on a daily basis, things that you have to look in the eye every day?
I mean, everything that I'm doing, I'm struggling. I'm fighting. I'm working. I mean, I'm trying to get stronger and faster. I'm not that good at anything, to be honest with you. I'm not that strong. I'm not that fast. I'm working all the time to try and get better. So I think I'm struggling with everything, and I'm always going to be struggling with everything, and I don't have a problem with that. I'm fine with it. It's pretty easy for me to admit that I'm not that great at anything, because I wouldn't be able to fool anyone if I said I was some superstar in any category.
And that kind of comes back to one of your other foundational philosophies, which is good, right? That's something you sort of stamp on a lot of different things. Oh, I have this struggle. Well, good. Then it gives you an opportunity for something else. Oh, this thing happened to me. Well, good. Well, it just set you up to have more strength later on in life. Where did that come from originally?
Well, I talked about this on the podcast. It was literally a guy that worked for me, and he was one of my platoon commanders when I was a task unit commander, and he was telling me about some problem that he was having, and he said, I already know what you're going to say. And I said, well, what am I going to say? And he said, you're going to say good, because that's what you always say to everything. And I said, well, yeah, that's what I mean. And it's true. You got a problem, then good. Now let's figure out a way to solve it and figure out a way to grow from it. So that is the way I look at things, and that's always the way I look at things. Got a problem? Good. What can we learn from it? How can it make me better?
Well, and this is not just an esoteric thing. This is not just a bumper sticker slogan or an Instagram inspiration campaign or something like that. You have to actually believe that the struggles that are coming your way are going to be beneficial for you and are going to produce a better version of yourself than you were before. It's something you have to kind of like deeply embody and adopt as part of your psychology almost. How is the transition for you from sort of private warrior to public figure? Like you go from this world that's, I don't want to say secretive, but it's very tight knit, it's very close. And then you're on the New York Times bestseller list, and you're flying around doing book tours and podcasts, and you have 500,000 followers on social media and all this stuff. How was that transition for you?
Other than it's not really that different. I'm not doing anything different I'm not living any differently than the way I've always lived. That's why I think it's not that big of a deal to me, is I'm not acting any different than I was 10 years ago. I'm still doing the same stuff. I still wake up early. I woke up early back then. I still wake up early now. I don't do anything different. So for me, it's not really that big of a deal. It's not this major strain on me because I'm not doing anything different than I've always done. I used to teach people about leadership. I still teach people about leadership. I used to tell people when I thought they were screwing up. I still tell people when I think they're screwing up. I used to work out every day. I still work out every day. I used to train jiu-jitsu all the time. I still train jiu-jitsu all the time. So for me, it's not that big of a deal because I'm not doing anything different than I've always done.
And I think that's the crucial thing there's one Jocko Willink, and that's going to be the same one regardless of what you're doing and where you're at in life. The book itself, which is on sale now on Amazon, and climbing up, I think it's number 8 on the overall charts on Amazon, which is saying something. It's physically beautiful, and it's tactically relevant. It is not bedtime reading. This is not a book that you're going to, because what I found out, I do a lot of my reading at night, and what I found out was that I would read the book, get like 5 or 6 pages, and now I'm all fired up and want to go work out, and it's 10 o'clock at night. So how do you recommend people use this book?
I think it's a reference book, really, like a field manual. It's a reference book that you pull out when you are experiencing something that you know that you need a little help with. And to be honest with you, this is a story. One of my best friend just got killed in a parachute accident, and of course I was crushed. And as I'm sitting there in a state of shock and dismay, I actually had to pull the book out myself, and I've got a thing in there that talks about when death comes in your life and what you have to do. And I actually had to pull out the book myself and read it. And this was a couple days. Yeah, the book wasn't even out yet. I just had the book. It wasn't out yet, but I had my copies of it. And I pulled it out and I read it, and I was like, yeah, that's right. And it's things that I've told other people. It's things I've lived through before. And it's something that I said, you know what? As I was sitting there going through my brain, I'm thinking to myself, this is a nightmare and this is a tragedy, and why did this happen? And I had to pull out that book myself and read that section and say, that's right. That's the way it is. And it was helpful for me. And that's why I think the book is going to be helpful, because it'll help people in those situations, whether it's, hey, someone's got a horrible thing happening in their life, and what can you do to support them? Or whether it's you just don't want to eat the donuts that are going to kill you. It's a very good manual to keep yourself on the path in life. And again, I think that people want to have freedom, but the path to freedom is through discipline.
What is the path? You use sort of that phrase, the path or the way, a lot of times. What does that look like to you?
The path and the way, and I do use it all the time, and it's to me, it's doing the things that you know you're supposed to do. That's what it is. You know what you're supposed to do, and you know what you're not supposed to do. You know what's going to make your life better, and you know what's going to make your life worse. You know what's going to improve your station and what's going to make your station worse. You know what's going to improve your health and what's going to make your health worse. You know these things. And so the path is doing the things that you're supposed to do that you know are going to improve you as a person. They're going to help your family. They're going to help your health. They're going to help your community, and they're going to help the world. Do those things. That's the path. And
know where you are relative to that path. You're not always going to be on it, but be conscious that you're not on it, rather than just mindlessly chasing Cinnabons through airports like we talked about before. At the end of the book is an appendix, I have it right here, full of workouts. And these workouts are brilliant in their brutal simplicity. There's nothing complicated here. I mean, some of them, like Olympic movements, are complicated in the nuance of them, but there's nothing fancy. It doesn't require a whole ton of equipment. You're not telling somebody they have to buy your 28-day protein shake, regimen or whatever. These are workouts you can do almost anywhere with very minimal stuff. How did you go about designing those? Did you rip those right out of your own workout notebooks, or?
Yeah, I did.
Nice.
And actually, years ago, some of my guys that were working for me, they were like, hey, can we have your workout program? Can we have your workout program? And I said, well, sure. And so I wrote it down on a spreadsheet, and the spreadsheet was called The Program, and I gave it to them, and that is the basis of what I put in the book. Because I've been doing the same type of workouts for the last, 25 years, last quarter century, the same type of workouts. And sure, there's little variations that have come along the way. There's things that have been modified a little bit, but it's pretty much the same type of workouts for the last quarter century.
And that's pretty incredible, because a quarter century is a long time to do anything. Like, have you had episodes where you're like, I am so bored with all of this crap, so I'm going to go do all of these other things? Have you kind of had that phase you've gone through? Or?
When you say all this crap and do these other things, which things are you talking about?
You tend to be sort of, from judging from the workouts that are in here, they're almost CrossFit style workouts, if I wanted to simplify it. Has there been a time where you're like, I'm going to go ride a bike for 6 months and not touch a barbell or anything like that?
Not really. Okay. Not really. Now, there might be some times where I'll have an injury, and I can't lift for a while. Maybe I hurt my rib a while ago, and so ribs are gnarly injuries because it's really hard to do much because you use your torso on just about every movement. So then, yeah, sure, I'm doing modified workouts, and I had to, for some reason, I couldn't do regular dips. I could only do ring dips. I have no idea why, but that's what I could do. And I had a shoulder injury recently, and so I couldn't do kipping pull-ups. I could only do dead hang pull-ups, and I couldn't do muscle-ups for a while, so I wasn't doing muscle-ups, and I'll just do other things. So yeah, I'll adapt my workout if I have some sort of an injury that I'm working around. I never stop working out, even with a rib injury. If I go in there and all I can do is do preacher curls, for my arms without moving the rest of my body, that's what I'll go and do. Because you have to go in there and do something. It just get the blood flowing, and it's mentally good for you. So people always ask me what I do when I'm injured. I do what I can. What I do when I'm sick, I do what I can. That's what I do. I always do what I can. What I do if there's a crappy gym, or I'm stuck in a hotel room, or I'm in some weird spot, I do what I can. That's what I do. And I recommend people do the same thing. Do what you can.
Nothing makes you feel quite like such a badass as crushing yourself in your hotel room and then walking past all the people eating the continental breakfast. That's that's the best feeling in the world, is watching people plowing through. And it's not even good food. Like, it's just waffles and bagels and stale stuff and orange juice that's like 5 years old.
Yeah, if you're gonna get it, if you're gonna go off the path, make it worthwhile. Like, like if you're gonna get pizza, right? Make it some good pizza. Don't make it some crap. Make it some good pizza that you're gonna relish. And then you're over it, and you're like, yeah, that was worth it. Don't get the microwavable pizza in the hotel lobby. Don't do that. It's not worth it.
No, roller meat is never a good thing. Gas station roller meat, there's just no reason to ever do that. The last thing I want to kind of touch on is the sort of military invasion of the fitness industry, and that's something I brought up in the first episode I did with Randy Hetrick. Was there has been, in the last 10 or 15 years, this huge influx of former military personnel into the fitness industry. There's been a tide change from jazzercise to Spartan races, and from like Richard Simmons to SEAL Fit, a complete 180 in what people are looking for to buy now and to participate in the fitness industry. What do you think is driving that change in the public?
Well, you mentioned Jazzercise and Richard Simmons, and I think that's about enough to drive a massive change in direction for all of humanity, thankfully. Now, maybe when I was a kid and, my mom was trying to get in shape when she was 38 years old and didn't really have any fitness background, and she saw Richard Simmons jumping around with a weird outfit on, maybe that encouraged her. But I think these days that just is completely out of touch with the way people are now. And I think people want harder things. I think life is too soft, and people realize that. And people want to get pushed, they want to get challenged, and that's why they look to do hard things, because I think they know it makes them better people.
Yeah, there's definitely I would call it a desire for legitimacy. People want to be able to do something that makes them feel intrinsically or extrinsically that they've accomplished something. And it's difficult to do that with step aerobics. It's a lot less difficult to do that with a barbell. When you put something heavy from the ground over your head, you just did something. If you go, finish an obstacle course race, you feel at the end that you have accomplished something, and you've earned it that day. That I think you don't get that from a lot of other things. And there's higher risks there, right? Like, you're going to challenge yourself physically in ways that you wouldn't have doing an easier program, but low risk, low reward, right?
Indeed.
So the last thing I wanted to touch on, what kind of advice do you give to current military personnel or veterans who are trying to make that transition into the fitness industry? There's a huge desire for it, and obviously, most of us who come out of service have some kind of background that we at least know what we're doing a little bit. How do you encourage people to get into that business?
Actually, I started thinking to myself, well, I'm not really in the fitness business, but then I remembered, I don't know if I mentioned this, but I have a big mixed martial arts gym in San Diego, California, with CrossFit in it, and boxing and wrestling and Muay Thai and Jiu-Jitsu. It's 21,000 square feet. It's this big, massive gym, and I've had it for 10 years. And so I guess I am in the fitness industry. And even this book, is obviously, it talks about fitness a lot. It gives actual workouts, but it's weird because I don't feel like my goal was ever to get into the fitness industry. I think that's just part of who I am, and I just was kind of doing what I do. I think so I don't really know if I have the authority to advise people on how to get into fitness, because what I did was I loved jiu-jitsu and working out, so I opened a gym that had jiu-jitsu and working out in it. And then a bunch of people asked me what kind of workouts I do, and I told them in a book, and that's kind of how I ended up in the fitness industry. I didn't try to break into the fitness industry. In fact, the fitness industry is very hard to get into because there's so many people that have good stuff to offer in every different arena. And same thing with gyms. Gyms are a really hard business to run. And same thing with selling fitness equipment. There's always somebody that's making something new. So I guess just like anything else, if you find something that you really love doing and you put out getting after it, then and it's good, other people will get on board and get in the game with you.
Talk about getting after it. This is something that you used in the book to talk about your pursuit of physical health and even psychological health. How do you apply that to your professional life as well? Just
outwork everyone. Like occasionally someone will joke around and on social media, and they'll say, "Oh, I got up earlier than you did today," and like you don't want to play that game with me. Seriously, I'm serious. You will not win that game with me. And it's the same thing with like hard work. Like I told you before, I was not a great athlete. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but I'm a hard worker. I will give myself that credit. And I think that's really the best thing that I could say. Going back to your previous question, how do you get in the fitness industry? How do you get in any industry? And how do you be successful? You work hard. That's what you have to do. And that's what I've always done. Because, like I said, was never the smartest, was never the best athlete, was never the fastest or the strongest, but I will be at work before you, and I'll stay at work after you, and when you're at home carrying on doing what you're doing, I'll still be grinding. And I think that's been a huge part of me being able to be successful in some of the businesses that I've started.
If you're sitting at home plowing through a box of Cheez-Its, watching Game of Thrones, and wondering why your life isn't getting better, the answer is self-evident. You cannot make progress toward a goal without actually physically moving toward the goal, and whatever that looks like, whether that's a double bodyweight back squat or starting your own business. Jocko, this has been incredible. I'm so privileged to be able to sit down and talk to you. The book is Discipline Equals Freedom Field Manual. It's been out for a little under 2 weeks on Amazon. It is on sale right now for $14.99. Where else can people find you online?
Well, my podcast is called Jocko Podcast. That's out on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you can listen to podcasts, it's on there. I have a website called jockopodcast.com. I have a store called jockostore.com where we sell t-shirts, sweatshirts, that kind of crap. Also have krill oil and joint warfare, Jocko joint warfare and Jocko super krill on there for if you've got joint issues or you want to prevent them. So that's jockostore.com. You can find me on the social media scene, hanging out hardcore with Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I am at Jocko Willink. I have, if you're interested in the business consulting or leadership training for you or your team, you can go to echelonfront.com. That's where that all takes place. And I got a YouTube channel called Jocko Podcast. So if you're looking for me, I'm not hard to find anymore.
I would say not. You are definitely a busy man. And again, thank you so much for setting aside the time. And I look forward to your next book full of dad jokes.
You will probably not be hearing that, but we'll see.
I'm interested to see what comes next.
Thanks, Pete.